things are, can you hear me? Okay, looks like things are quieting down, so I think we'll go ahead and start with our meeting. And I just want to welcome everybody here. I am excited to see such a good turnout because this is going to be such an important meeting. We have partnered, I'm Terry Roach, I'm with the Upper Rattlesnake Leadership Team, and we have partnered with the Lower Rattlesnake so that everybody in the valley can be a part of this meeting and can hear the information that's going to be presented. I am the co-chair of the leadership team on the Upper Rattlesnake, and Andrea is the other co-chair.
Andrea is the soft-spoken member of the leadership team, and Terry is incredible. She is the most amazing person. I am but a shadow of this woman, but we have other wonderful members on the leadership team, including Kathy Gaskell, who is our marvelous secretary and takes amazing minutes. Kathy has also been signing people in at the door, enabling you to get pizza. She would not let you in without signing in. We also have Kevin Hunt, and I don't know, Kevin, are you here? Kevin, if you would stand. Kevin is our community forum representative. One of our newest members is Judy Molland, and Judy is our alternative community forum representative. And Judy? So, and last but not least, we have Doug Grimm, and Doug has been on this committee for a long time. Doug is responsible for those gorgeous signs that greet you as you approach the Upper Rattlesnake and leave the Upper Rattlesnake. And so he is our artist in residence, and he's the one who's gotten the word out about, or is very effective at getting the word out about these meetings. I didn't do Jeannie. I'm sorry, Jeannie, I apologize. Jeannie Alonzo Adams is our Transportation Committee representative. And that's a very important part of what we do with the Upper Rattlesnake, because we have a lot of trails and bike trails and crossing issues. So she is also a fairly new and invaluable member of the team. So,
and I'm going to introduce the members of the Lower Rattlesnake leadership team. Peter Lessica and Robert Schultz are co-chairs. Is Robert here? And Robert is also the community forum representative. Gracie Sanford is the alternate community forum representative. Is Gracie here? Okay. Kathy Tonneson is the secretary. Hi, Kathy. And Marta Mings and Joan Steelquist are members at large. Oh, you guys are too shy, too shy. And I'd also like to introduce Kalina Pritchard and Melissa Glukert from the Office of Neighborhoods. They're back in the corner, without whom we would have a heck of a time functioning. They are so helpful and so supportive.
so we have 2 items of business that we need to cover. The first one is approving the minutes from last year's general meeting of the Upper Rattlesnake Council. So on January 31st, you may remember it was a blizzard. We had about 80 people in attendance, unlike this evening, which is wonderful. The minutes have been posted on the Neighborhood Council website. All minutes and agendas are posted there. So I would ask if the Upper Rattlesnake would be willing to approve of the minutes. If I may have a motion to approve.
So moved.
May I have a second?
I second.
Could I have a show of hands for those who are part of the Upper Rattlesnake who would approve those minutes? Okay, I'm going to do a quick count. 57 people. The minutes are approved. Thank you. The second order of business, we always have non-agenda items, and it's an important part of the procedure to allow non-agenda items. Because we have such a full slate tonight, we literally have about 5 minutes for non-agenda items. So we would be happy to at least entertain them at this point. There won't be full discussion, but we can bring them up and then have them at a later meeting. So, are there any non-agenda items? It's such a full agenda, I can't imagine. Yes.
How do you divide the upper rattlesnake from the lower rattlesnake?
I think it's Lolo. Is it? Well, there you go. It's Holly Street. Evidently it's changed to Holly. Yes.
Park, I'm on the board with probably some other members here. We're going to be doing a Norway maple eradication starting the end of April. So we're trying to get rid of control the Norway maple in Tom Green Park. If you have any questions, there's a meeting tomorrow that's online, and you can get a hold of Missoula Parks and Trails to get access to it.
Thank you, Tom. Any other items? Sure.
Hey, all my neighbors, especially in the upper Rattlesnake. I'm Deb with Watershed Education Network. Loyola Sacred Heart students on theme for tonight are going to be making some announcements about how to do evacuation and provide people with kits for evacuation items so that you're ready to evacuate with your own kit of materials. So you'll be getting an envelope from some Loyola Sacred Heart folks if you're in the upper Rattlesnake. And these students are working diligently to help us prepare in a natural disaster. So be watching for that. It's not junk mail. If it comes to your house, that'll be from some students from Loyola Sacred Heart. Thanks.
Thank you, Deb. Any other non-agenda items?
Just a quick question.
Sure.
Did you say how many people total are in the upper and lower Rattlesnake? Will that be covered? Is that known?
The actual population?
How many in the upper, how many in the lower?
I don't have the foggiest. I truly, yeah, that would be. Kalina, do you have any idea the population?
I can find it for you. If
Okay.
you want to find me just a little bit, or after the meeting, I can get that to you.
Perfect, thank you. It's a good question. There are 170 people here tonight, so the people who care about evacuating are here.
I think that's a good question, just
It's
because
a
in
great
terms of
question.
evacuation, wouldn't it be sensible to know how many people you got that need
Oh.
to be evacuated?
People know, I just don't know.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah. Someone knows. We'll find
The
out.
other point I'd like to bring up, and I asked the people at the wildfire preparedness table about this, it seems to me like having the train line is a impediment to evacuating the valley. And when I asked those folks over there, they said something like it costs $1 million a day or something to shut down the train line. But if you have one avenue of egress from the valley shut down because a train is there, $1 million pales in comparison to a bunch of tragedy, a bunch of deaths like you're due to having to avoid a train. And I think that's something that should be considered.
I think what you are actually bringing up is something that is an agenda item, and it is a very important item. And I think some of the folks who are presenting tonight will be very interested in hearing that and may actually be talking about that. So you're giving us a segue from non-agenda to agenda. Thank you. Oh. Thank you very much for attending. I think it should be a very interesting and informative meeting.
With that, I'm pleased to introduce Nick Holloway, who's the Deputy DES Coordinator with the Missoula County Office of Emergency Management, and he will take over at this point.
Thanks, Terry. Tim, if we could get the lights off. We'll see how dark we get it in here. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Well, thanks everybody for coming to this meeting to talk about evacuations. Before we get started, I'd like to just do some housekeeping and tell you that the bathrooms are right over there with the lights on in the doorway, and the exits, should there be an emergency, are there and there. We are going to ask you to hold your questions until the end so that we can keep the flow of this going and be efficient with it. If somebody shouts out a question that we can answer real quickly and it's for the benefit of the entire group, we'll answer it quickly and move on. But if we get into a question that may not benefit everybody or may get down into the weeds, we're going to sidebar that and table that question until after the presentation is over. So we're here to talk about evacuations. And evacuations are a big deal, obviously. They can occur up here just like they can occur anywhere else. We have some nice pieces of technology that help us with evacuations. We're going to show you some of that tonight. However, when evacuations occur, the technology helps. It's a tool. But you all have to do your part in knowing how to evacuate, how to receive the information, where to go, and when to go. And the first step in that is just being here, right now, and learning more about it. So thanks for being here. It's a really good crowd we have here. Okay. So just a quick thank you to some folks that are having us here. Terry Roach approached us a while back and asked us to put on this presentation for folks. We thought we can do that. This is a great idea. Let's go ahead and do that. So thanks very much, Terry. We've been working with Terry all along to make this happen. We have a gentleman named Brooks Bailey here, sitting over there. He is with one of the pieces of technology I just talked about called Ladris, and they help us with evacuation modeling. And what you need to know is no model is perfect, but it does give us some good information to go on. And it gives us information like what traffic flow would be like, where pinch points might be, where we might need a little extra help with traffic control, those kinds of things, how long it might take. And then we have a lot of cooperating agencies here today. If an evacuation were to occur, we would have some of them working with us, but not the exhaustive list that we have here. We'll go through that in a moment. But our objectives for tonight are really to have a call of action for all of you, to get you to, if you haven't already signed up for Smart 911 and emergency alerts in Missoula County, please do that. We'll talk more about that later, but you just go to smart911.com and click on create an account, and it'll walk you through it. How many people here have heard of Smart 911? That's pretty good. How many people here have signed up for Smart 911? That's pretty good too. And you guys are a pretty well-informed, energetic, and engaged group, and that's awesome to see. Our next objective is to be here, understand how to get prepared for an evacuation, understand what kinds of things you need to pack. Everybody's evacuation is different in terms of what they may need to take with them. So we'll give you some hints on that. And we have a slide on it, but on this card, there are the 6 P's of evacuation. And you can go through that to help you get ready. And to have an emergency plan. So if you were to evacuate, how would you meet up with your family? To think about those things, dinner time conversations. So those are the objectives, to get you to do those kind of things so you're maximally prepared. And the more prepared the neighborhoods are, the more efficiently and the farther our resources go to help those in need. So here are some of the cooperating agencies we would have in an evacuation. Emergency management, I'm Nick Holloway with the Missoula Emergency Management, Office of Emergency Management. Some of my colleagues, Ken Parks and Adrian Beck from the Office of Emergency Management. Max Reynolds are also here. We have the police department here with Matt Stonecipher. We have the sheriff's office here with Captain Jared Cochran. We have some members of the fire department over here. You can come up to us after the presentation and ask us whatever questions are on your mind. Missoula Rural would also be a partner. The 911 Center would also be a partner. The regional hazmat team would be a partner in certain scenarios, and one of them we'll go through tonight. Montana Department of Transportation, the Weather Service, Mountain Line, Missoula County GIS, that's mapping, the DNRC, the Forest Service, our COAD organizations, that's community organizations active in disaster. Our CERT team is part of that. So we have a lot of partners that are going to help us get through an evacuation, help us help you guys. So first things first, getting started. So getting started starts with, as I said, coming here, and then having a discussion at dinner with your family about where you're going to meet up if an evacuation occurs, how you're going to communicate with each other. That's probably easier than it ever has been in the past since we all have cell phones now. But we still need a meeting spot. That's true. So think about that. Talk about that when if the towers are working. What if the cell phones go out? How are you going to communicate with one another? How will you be alerted? So our primary alerting mechanism is Smart 911. It's easy to sign up for. When you go to smart911.com, you click on the create an account icon, as most of you already have. And you can not only sign up for alerts via text or email or phone call, but you can also create what we call a safety profile while you're there. You don't have to, but it's a voluntary profile you create that pops up on a 911 dispatcher screen when you make an emergency call. And it tells that dispatcher what critical care information you have put in your profile that you think emergency responders might need to know if they have to respond to help you or a loved one in your household. What do you need to take with you? We're going to go over that shortly. Where will you store it? So it's important, especially as we enter fire season, to get some of this stuff together and have it in a readily available place so you can grab and go. The time to start packing is not when the evacuation order is issued, and we're going to go through what an evacuation order versus an evacuation warning are. But the time is not the last minute to start packing. To be ready to go is the most important thing, so you can just get out as quickly as possible. And again, to have that communications plan set up with your family. It's not complicated at all, but it does take a little prior planning and discussion. So what should you take? There's what's called the 6 P's of evacuation, and they're right here. And it starts with people and pets. So one of the primary reasons people do not evacuate, we know, is because of their pets. They want to take care of their pets, and maybe they can't take care of their pets fast enough. So having that thought out beforehand, how you're going to take your pet with you, is an important piece of evacuation. Phone numbers, papers, important documents, insurance documents, very important to have. Prescriptions, extremely important to have your medications with you. So make sure you take enough medications to get you through at least a couple days. If you get back in, great. If it's going to be a more extended period that you're evacuated, then you can probably get more prescriptions from your pharmacist. But take enough for at least 72 hours. Pictures and irreplaceable memorabilia. This is really important to take and to pack beforehand, because you don't want to be going through your drawers looking for pictures at the time of an evacuation. Personal computers and hard drives often store a lot of important financial and insurance type documents, so be sure to grab your laptop if you can, or a hard drive. And money, plastic cash. You'll need something to spend, some money to spend when you get out on things like food and prescriptions. So just be ready for those kind of things. And think about it, not everybody needs all the same things. Everybody's unique in what they need. So think about what your needs are and having your things ready to go. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Adrian Beck, who is the Director of the Office of Emergency Management here in Missoula County.
Well, good evening. Thank you all for being here on a rainy April evening. You know, we always love to talk with engaged communities because the more conversations we can have ahead of an emergency, when we're not gathered in a gym because there's a big fire in your neighborhood, the better prepared you are, the better outcomes that we see. And so it's really important, and we're very much appreciative of your time and attention tonight. So when we talk about evacuations, it's probably the single most question that we get asked in our office. And just as a little bit of an overview, the Office of Emergency Management in Missoula is a city-county department. We house two divisions, Disaster and Emergency Services, and we also oversee the 911 Center for all of Missoula City and all of Missoula County. Within Disaster and Emergency Services, we have a responsibility for housing our emergency operations plans, which allow us to formulate a large-scale incident management structure based on who has jurisdictional authority and or responsibility, but also lays out all of the legal authorities for us to take certain actions in emergencies or disasters. It is our responsibility to work with all of these cooperating agencies that Nick listed up there to exercise those plans, to make sure that people understand what their roles and responsibilities are, how every other agency that may be a cooperating agency is going to plug into that incident command structure so that we can create our common objectives and bring that incident to resolve and protect life and property. Evacuations are probably one of the most consequential things that we do. Asking people to leave their homes amid a disaster or an emergency is not something we take lightly. And it takes a tremendous amount of coordination. The question about limited egress and how we're going to get people out is something that we think about all the time. You don't have to look very far in Missoula City or Missoula County to understand that our geographic nature has many one-way in, one-way out, limited ingress and egress valleys that are heavily populated. So it's something we think about all the time. Part of what we'll talk about tonight, and part of what we want to showcase tonight, is some of the new tools that we have been able to deploy that are helping us to better plan for those evacuations, to better check and ground truth our assumptions, to better walk through our exercises so that those individuals that have that responsibility for determining when and where an evacuation will occur have better information and better situational awareness, better assumptions of how that evacuation will unfold. So Nick talked a little bit about how you're going to be notified that you need to evacuate. And I acknowledge that it's very unsatisfying for people to hear that here's the plan for evacuations. Are you ready? Be prepared to receive emergency alerts and be prepared to follow directions. Because we have various hazards that may necessitate doing different things. So we oftentimes get asked, well, I was just on the West Coast and they have all these signs that have the evacuation routes all mapped up with arrows exactly where to go. For tsunamis, absolutely. The action for evacuation from a tsunami is going to be the same. Get to higher ground, get away from the ocean. But what we ask people to do in a wildfire may be different than what we ask them to do in a hazardous material spill. It may be different if we're going to ask people to shelter in place for a significant amount of time. And so that being able to follow directions is really important. And how you're going to know that information is by making yourself available to receive that information through emergency alerts. So we use Smart 911, which is a software called RAVE, Mobile Safety, that enables us to send those hyper-geographic alerts. So we can hone that down to the neighborhood, or we can expand it out to an entire valley. What it allows us to do is, as Nick mentioned, how you've determined that you want to be communicated with, whether it's just a text, whether it's a text and a voice call, a voice call and an email. It allows us to do that all simultaneously. It also allows us to provide a lot more information than we would if we relied on some of the other tools that we also have access to. I'm gonna skip through this just a little bit and talk about kind of the three different types of alerts that we have at our disposal. So we have means alerts, which are our lowest level of alerts. No one opts in for those. They are broadcast alerts that typically are initiated from first responders in the field for minor traffic delays, nuisance type things. We want people to stay out of an area because of a traffic accident. We're not going to disrupt people. We're just going to broadcast that information out. News media oftentimes will pick that up, and then they'll broadcast that out as well. It's how we get the word out to avoid certain areas. But those are very low consequence alerts. We're not disrupting people. We're not asking people to necessarily take protective action. The next level of alerts are those that we're going to push through Smart 911. Those allow us to send a whole bunch of information. They allow us to attach attachments to emails and send pictures and have long text messages as well as a voice call. Those are our best option for alerts because they allow us to be very hyper-focused. As I mentioned, we can hone those alerts down to a very specific neighborhood, but it also allows us to provide the best information up front. The highest level of alert that we have, who here has ever received an Amber Alert? Okay? Your phone makes noises you didn't know it could make. You see the alert show up on your screen and then you can't figure out how to read it, right? We can do that too. And we can do that for a list of hazards or emergencies that are likely to occur in Missoula. We have alerting authority for that. That is the Integrated Public Alerts and Warning System. Anybody who is familiar with the old EAS, and it's still EAS, the Emergency Alert System. But about 15 years ago, Congress directed the Office of Homeland Security to develop Integrated Public Alerts and Warning to take all of the new technologies and funnel them into one portal, and that's what IPAWS is. So that allows us to trigger EAS, which is that duck quack that you hear on local broadcast radio every now and then when they're testing the EAS system. It's when you see the crawl that comes across the bottom of local broadcast television stations. And it's also what trips NOAA weather radio. It also will send those wireless emergency alerts like an Amber Alert. The problem with those alerts is they are our highest level of alert. They don't allow us to be as specific from a geo-targeting standpoint, so we might not be able to get down to that neighborhood level. We're going to over-alert. We have text and character limitations on how much information we can put into those because we are forcing those alerts. We're forcing the cell phone providers to push those alerts through to all of their subscribers. And so we're very limited in the amount of information that we can provide. It's a great tool to have in the toolbox, but it does not provide the level of information, the level of detail that we strive to do in an evacuation. But we have it if we need it. Okay, so in Missoula County, as I mentioned, we have these emergency operations plans that kind of detail out how we're going to do evacuations, who's going to be responsible, who makes that initial call, and who makes that determination of when and where an evacuation is appropriate is the incident commander. Whether it's a law enforcement incident commander or a fire incident commander, they're the ones with the subject matter expertise to say, people are in harm's way, we need to get them out of here, and this is the scale and scope of the evacuation that we need. They do that through communication with 911 and their cooperating mutual aid partners. And then our office gets involved to draw the polygon. So what you see here, boy, that doesn't show up so well on that screen, does it? But what you see here, kind of boxed around in yellow, is the polygon that we used to do the Smart 911 test ahead of this meeting. But it's an example of how we draw a shape, and within that shape, those are the people that we're going to alert. It's going to come across as a warning, which means something's happening and we want you to be aware of it. Now is the time to start thinking about where you're going to go. If the situation changes, then that will be upgraded to an order, and that is, we're telling you it is time to go. It is time to leave. What I often tell people is that these opportunities, blue sky day opportunities, and those dinner table conversations that Nick mentioned are the best opportunity to start thinking through what ifs. As a family, as a household, what if XYZ happens? Where would we go? What would we do? How would we meet up? How would we communicate? How are we going to receive the alert? What happens if I'm at work and it comes across then and I've got kids at home? Things to be thinking about, because the more you can think about what if ahead of time, the less scary those now what conversations are, because it helps you kind of build your own expectations. And part of what we want to do tonight is help inform those expectations a little bit as to what this looks like. So, shelters and holding areas. When we get a request to issue an evacuation warning or order, one of the first things that we're going to do, aside from kind of the mechanics of making sure the information can go out, is then start coordinating with all of the other entities that need to be part of the program. One of them is the American Red Cross. We're going to call them and ask them to establish an emergency shelter so that anybody who's being evacuated has some place to go. Now, I've been doing this for almost 11 years. We've done probably a dozen or so evacuations across the county, and we see very low utilization of emergency shelters. Doesn't mean that we're not going to open them, but what that tells us is that people find someplace else to go. And so part of this conversation tonight is thinking about where else would you go? Would you go to a hotel? Would you go to a family or friend's house? Or would you rely on a shelter? And if you're going to rely on a shelter, that's perfect. We're gonna try to stand that up for you. But that takes a little bit of time. It can take up to about 6 hours before we have a shelter stood up and ready to receive people after an evacuation order has been issued. We may, in those initial conversations with either first responders that are coming to your door to tell you it's time to evacuate, or within that emergency alert that you received, ask you to go to a holding area. We will do absolutely everything we can to get you as much information as we can within that holding area. But that Smart 911 alert is also our way to keep communication with you after you've been evacuated. When it's time to go back home, we'll send another alert. If there's a status change to, if you went from a order and now we're going to allow you back in but under a warning status, we're going to send that information that way as well.
On those shelters and holding areas, are there plans for any of those to be located within the Rattlesnake in case evacuation is delayed?
Yes, we'll talk about shelter in place, and as part of that, needing to be prepared to follow directions, right? We do things differently than we normally would do on a blue sky day. And we may cut fences, we may commandeer a school, we may do those kinds of things in the moment based on what is needed, but we don't necessarily have a plan that says we're always going to go to this field. And
there's no pre-planning, like this gymnasium would not be part of any pre-planned local shelter?
It's an option for consideration, you bet. Yes, if that answers your question. So these sheets are how we talk about evacuation. Like I said, you can go anywhere in the country and talk about evacuations, and everybody does things just a little bit different. We've tried over the years to simplify this down to plain text so that people understand what we're talking about and what we want them to do. So we have evacuation warnings, as I mentioned. That means something's going on. You need to be heads up about it. We're trying to give you some situational awareness that things could change and could change quickly. And it is the best case scenario to be able to start with an evacuation warning and then escalate that to an evacuation order. Oftentimes, the situation unfolds in such a way that we we never have time to do a warning. It goes straight to order. So we want you to be aware of the terminology that we're using and kind of what action that necessitates. Now, there's nothing that prevents somebody from getting an evacuation warning and having already gone through kind of their own situational awareness as an individual of what they need to do and their unique needs, that says, you know what, I'm not going to wait for an order, I'm just going to go now. There's nothing that prevents you from doing that. All right. Did I miss anything? Two law enforcement. All right. With that, what we wanted to do tonight was to show you a little bit about kind of what goes into how we think about evacuations, how they unfold, how some of the decision-making processes that we go through, whether we're going to say, everybody on this side of the road, we want you to evacuate, versus everybody on that side, we want you to stay in warning, or whether we want to do a phased evacuation, whether we want to change the flow of traffic. All of those things are considerations that are made in the moment. Those determinations are made in the moment based on the severity of the situation and how it's unfolding. And the variability of all of these incidents makes it really hard to have a very black and white conversation of saying, you're always going to go out your driveway and turn left. Because we may prevent you from going out your driveway because we have to get people who are in a higher risk situation out of the way first. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ken Parks, who is our other Deputy Disaster Emergency Services Coordinator.
Thanks. So as Adrian mentioned, I'm gonna build 3 scenarios for you guys tonight. We started with the easy one, the established wildfire. I think that most of you were probably around for the Beast Co fire, which wasn't too long ago, a fire in the wilderness that's being managed by a fire management team. So I think in that scenario, we're gonna have some time, right? We're gonna have 24 to 48 hours of predictive services, and you're going to see fire crews in your neighborhood prepping homes. We're going to work very closely, the Sheriff's Office, and the fire management team, and the Office of Emergency Management. We're going to build evacuation zones that make sense to us and to the team, and we're going to be in constant contact with those folks and monitoring the weather and having public meetings, and we'll be in contact with you guys. So during this scenario, the weather changes, the fire starts to move, and the fire management team comes to us and indicates that they think that fire is going to be pushing into the upper Rattlesnake neighborhood within 24 hours. So that's kind of our little picture of the fire we have. It's about 1.5 miles off of the trailhead. The predicted weather coming up is going to push that fire to the south, and they would like to get you guys out of the way before it does. So we have some time, right? So we've set up these evacuation zones, and they're going to come through. We've got you under the warning. You've been given some notice that this fire's in the neighborhood. Everyone can see the smoke, the helicopters, the retardant planes, the fire trucks have been there, and we've been having meetings. So I think everybody should be well aware of what's happening. And those people will be under an evacuation warning at the time. And the fire management team is going to recommend to us that we move into an evacuation order to get everybody out of the way in a safe and methodical manner. So this is the best case scenario, like Adrian had mentioned. At this point, I'd like to introduce Brooks, who's come to us all the way from Texas to talk about this Ladris model that we're working together on. That's just like me. Yeah, okay. Well, there's not much up there to look at, so. Brooks is here. He's going to take us through this model now. He'll explain to you the capabilities of this and kind of the tool that we're going to use it for. So, here you are.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you for the warning about that, because now I get to spare everyone getting cut off. Yeah, my name is Brooks Bailey. I'm here on behalf of a company named Ladris Technologies. And I just wanted to first thank the Office of Emergency Management and everyone here for having me up here today. It's a pleasure to be here. So what I'm going to show is the simulation of the scenario that Ken just described. So what we're looking at here, just as a quick overview, is the distribution of all of the address points that we've received from Missoula County GIS. That's the team of mapping specialists that work for the county. So we've got that plugged into Ladris, and we're looking at an evacuation, right? That, to be clear, this is really this is really kind of the worst case scenario for this evacuation, right? So, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so as we watch this play out, as these homes are evacuated, we're seeing these addresses turn from purple to green. And so, of course, since this is a fire that is coming potentially into Rattlesnake from the north, the zone up here at the top is going to be evacuated first, right? But even while we have that order coming to the zone 1, as Adrian described earlier, we're still going to have people that are welcome to leave. So what Ladris has done here is assume that people are going to also be evacuating from, the area between Lolo and, between Highway 90, right? So what we see is a total evacuation time of 6 hours and 11 minutes, right? So this is, like I said, kind of the worst case where we have everyone leaving from a home in all of the Rattlesnake area with 2 cars, right? So 2 people minimum, right? Pulling out of almost every one of the homes in Rattlesnake. So the goal here is to show, kind of an unmitigated, without any traffic control scenario. And so we've got that total time of 6 hours and 11 minutes with a worst case trip time of just over an hour and an average vehicle evacuation trip time of 28 minutes.
Do you have the total number of address points?
I do, yeah. The total number of addresses here is 2,556. This was generated today. So I will leave it there. Like Nick said, if there's any questions about this or any of the others that I go over, I can answer those, but I'll hand it back to Ken for now.
Thanks, Brooks. So as you can see, this is a tool that we can use to just kind of look at what if a train came and blocked this intersection, how much longer does it take people to get out there? We can model that, we can block intersections, we can actually add roads and say, well, what if we added this road? Does this help people get out? If we do the contraflow, like Adrian had mentioned, if we take a street and make both streets go the same direction, how does that help people get out more quickly? So this is a model we're going to be using, and looking at, for the future planning and for conversations with the sheriff's office and the fire departments as to what do we need to do in case of an evacuation of these areas, and what sort of things can we expect to happen, and what can we do to make them go more smoothly. So we're really excited about this, and we're really hoping that this does move us into some planning and into some future kind of gaming out what this looks like moving forward. I lost the clicker. Okay. Thanks, Bruce. All right, so we saw the model. We saw how that kind of looks like. And the important thing, we could pick a point somewhere off the map and say everybody should gather here, and the model will run that for us and show us pinch points, but the most important thing to us is to know when everybody's out of danger. So, we do want people to be able to get to these places, but what the most important thing to us is to know that everybody's making it out of there safely and everybody's getting out of there in time. So this is our next model. It's not nearly as fun as the last one, but it's one that is very realistic and could potentially happen in the Rattlesnake, where we've had some fires erupt in the Grant Creek area that were similar to this. So this is not something that is outside the realm of what could happen. This is a fast-moving grass fire. It's started by a power line, and that's the location of it. And it is moving from the east, or from the west to the east, pushed by heavy winds on a very dry red flag day. We have low humidities and high temperatures. It's fire season, something that, as you guys should probably always be paying attention to the weather during fire season. I would encourage you to keep an eye on that and to understand when there's red flag warnings, what that means to you guys. Okay. All right, so here comes the fire. And just like Adrian mentioned, we're not going to have time to put out a warning. We're going to have to go directly to an evacuation order. That will be assisted by our law enforcement and our fire departments. We'll begin evacuating people from the immediate threat as it strikes the neighborhood. And at the same time, they'll be having conversations with the 911 center describing what the fire is doing and what neighborhoods it's moving into. And we will be putting out a rave alert. It's just going to be a little bit behind those lights and sirens and those responding officers and people that are coming into the neighborhood to stop the fire and to get you guys out of the way. So they may come in with loudspeakers, lights and sirens. They move slowly through your neighborhood. They may go door to door if there's time, but they're going to try and get you guys awake and get you guys out of the way as quickly as possible. So this model that we've selected will have that sort of flavor to it, where the initial front moves into the west side of the Rattlesnake and then starts to push through the neighborhood, causing us to evacuate the entire Rattlesnake neighborhood.
Thank you. Okay, so what we saw previously, right, was the current experimentation with the zone definition kind of running down north to south. But what we're doing here is looking at zones that actually are associated with the fire that's coming in from the west. So we've got a first zone defined here, and then a second zone defined here. Thank you, perfect. And then a third zone defined below that. So that's where we'll see this evacuation playing out in this simulation. In this scenario, we're going to have 2,543 addresses. So watching this play out a couple of times, we've got all of the vehicles have evacuated, meaning they've all left their address within the first 15 minutes, just assuming like this is an absolute emergency, but realistically, right, it's probably going to be more than that, but just for the purposes of this model, we're looking at a total evacuation time frame of about 2.5 hours, right? So realistically, we could more than likely see a shorter total evacuation time frame if folks left in a probably more realistic time frame, maybe 45 minutes. But again, the goal here is trying to see, pushing the bounds of maybe what's realistic to see kind of what is the worst case scenario if we're trying to get everyone out as fast as possible. So again, we've got folks leaving from the west, and some of the zones, the zone 2, zone 3, folks will of course be leaving. They'll see folks leaving from that zone 1, but they're ultimately going to be leaving primarily from zone 1, then zone 2, zone 3. So we're seeing a total evacuation time frame there of about 2.5 hours, like I said, as well as we've got a worst case scenario here of 2.5 hours and an average vehicle trip time of 1 hour and 53 minutes. Yes, sir.
How did the roundabouts down by Interstate 90 figure into your model?
That's a good question. So we're actually doing this right here. Oh yeah, for sure. So his question was, how are we factoring in the roundabouts around Interstate 90? So what we're looking at is a kind of traffic control. Once we've gotten people onto the side of safety, when they've gotten onto 90, we're just saying, well, we need to pretty much get people down to a safety boundary, right? So we've kind of got this broken off to where the simulated vehicles are really just able to move down here, down to 5th Street. And then from there, as Adrian mentioned, we understand, you know, that they'll be setting up shelter locations, but a lot of people won't be moving elsewhere, so we're really just wanting to see how long it takes for folks to get to that general area. Does that answer your question?
Well, the reason I posed it was because just on a normal morning, the roundabouts back up at 8 o'clock. So if you have a fire situation where everybody's trying to get out in a hurry, I assume the same kind of thing will happen.
Sure, yeah, and we can definitely talk more about the details of that afterwards. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so those are the kind of things that do kind of show in this model. You see these roads turning from green to red and red to green. That indicates places where the traffic is being pinched. And those are places where we can put an officer to stop other traffic coming in, close down the interstate. You know, part of what we did with our model was we did shut down this north side route. Nobody was going that way. We could readjust this model and look at, well, what if we shutter people this way? What if we close this road? Those are some of the things we can talk about, and we can identify places where likely we'll need some law enforcement help. And none of it's earth-shattering. I think that you guys all kind of know where the traffic backs up in the Rattlesnake every day. I don't think it's a secret where the turns are and where people are going to need to be, but I do believe that we can look at some different things with this model.
If you're evacuating zone 1 or 2, do you stop the people in the lower Rattlesnake from exiting at that time and filling up the road?
We don't think we would have the capacity to stop them, because that would take a cop at every intersection, right? Making sure nobody gets out onto that roadway. But we would not actively evacuate them. But I don't think it would be, it would not be within our purview to stop them from leaving yet and then allowing them to leave. We would order our evacuation in that manner, but if people want to leave, they're going to be able to go.
Well, they have evacuated once, and it was solid stop traffic from Lincoln to the
Yeah.
Not too many years ago, when we had a similar meeting, the idea was that you're going to have fire trucks and fire personnel going up the Rattlesnake. At the same time, you've got people coming down. And one of the thinking at that time, if you noticed up in your map up there, there was a dark spot. That was actually the soccer field. And that was designated as a safe zone to go to. So at that time, the thinking was maybe the best thing is not to evacuate, but to go to a safe zone.
I think that is absolutely something that we could explore and talk about. As a neighborhood, you know, some places where we could store some people, you know, but not everybody's going to be able to go to the soccer field, right? So then you have to have some sort of management there in place to say soccer field's full, keep going, right? But I think that is something that can be talked about. Nothing's off the table. Absolutely. Let me get through this last scenario, because it's going to cause lots more questions and more consternation. So let me get through this one, and then we'll start tackling some of the things you guys want to talk about. So this next scenario is something that keeps emergency managers up at night. It is a hazmat spill off of a train near the roundabouts. So that's the affected area, that green blob right there. We had a train full of chlorine come off the tracks and it is currently causing a gas cloud. We do have Missoula Fire Department here to answer any hazmat questions you may have. I'm going to take a stab at it, and if you guys would like to come in and add in, but we have hazmat professionals who will come in, and they get right together with they determine the product, they determine the weather, the direction it's blowing, and then they determine the hazard to the population. And then upon those sort of determining factors, they're going to draw a circle. Oh, yeah, well, this is a real life thing. This happened not so long ago in East Palestine. Train derailed. And some of you may remember the Alberton train spill from 1994. Yes. Okay. So the hazmat team has responded, and they've called back to 911, and they said, we have a bad thing going on, a chlorine spill, and we have to make a 1 mile concentric circle for the hot zone. And so at that point, 911 is going to start pushing out the emergency alerts. And these emergency alerts are going to go, we're going to just focus on the Rattlesnake, but this is the area that would likely be affected by that spill. So now we're going to run the model, and the model is just for the Rattlesnake. We're not modeling the evacuations everywhere, so we can show it to you. And depending on some of the products that are released, you may get a shelter in place, you may get a run for your life kind of message from your evacuation. So in this certain scenario, you can't go south, right? You cannot go towards that train track. So we are evacuating everybody to the north and pushing everybody up as far as we can safely. And as someone mentioned, the school and the soccer fields, and those will be places that we'll be designating as gathering points for the evacuations from this train spill. So these are the folks who are currently leaving the 1 mile radius. And you do remember, take into account that this is 2.3 cars leaving every household. And we know that's a little over the top, but we like to work in worst case scenarios. It also factors in people pulling trailers and people who have large trucks who take up lots of space and maybe go more slowly. So some of this stuff has built-in modeling based on just population averages. And we know that that's different for every neighborhood, but this is what we have built in, and it's what we're going with. And also keep in mind that that circle could then move further north depending on which way the wind is blowing, and that sort of activity. Anything from the hazmat bunch? Okay, any questions on this model?
There is a road that goes up over the Delaware Saddle, and they would access Marshall Canyon Road. It has a locked gate.
We have looked at that road.
We can't hear you.
She is talking about the two-track road that goes from the Rattlesnake over to Marshall Canyon up through that saddle. And there is one residence up on that saddle, and I believe that gentleman uses it as his driveway. And then as you come past his house, it turns into a very weeded up two-track and comes down to a gate at the bottom of Marshall. So it is potentially there as a way for people to get out, but it is certainly not a recommended route because it only takes one person getting a flat tire or driving off the road or causing an issue to block that whole road and thus potentially trap everybody else behind them. And when you look at especially wildfire, smoky conditions, and the fact that that road leads you up into flashy fuels that could really catch you, that fire could move very quickly through that saddle, and before you know it, all of Marshall Canyon could be on fire before you even get there. So that we've looked at it and we've considered it as what potential and what ifs, and maybe under a situation like this where folks have nowhere else to go and it's going to be a long extended period and there's no way to get south, we may send in some trucks and open that road up and guide people out that way just so that we can get people out of a bad situation that they can't go south. So we haven't ruled it out, we know about it, but we think that it's very situational as to where it may come into play and be a safe way to move folks.
We factored in the fact that our transportation system is so much beach, with the local
filtering through neighborhoods.
Can you repeat the
Oh,
question?
so he's asking about the bridge off of Lolo Street, on Lolo Street, that allows for east-west traffic. It's the crossbar that makes up the H for the two main roads that come out. And he's indicating that, could we fix that bridge? And could we? It's scheduled for replacement. Okay.
When?
I don't know. I'm not. We've been thinking about other bridges here lately, so. but certainly those are the sorts of questions and things that we do want to talk about, and look at different options, different methods. We can run this model with roads that are blocked, roads that are open, and we can sort of start those discussions about, how can we do this better? How can we do this more safely and in a more efficient manner?
The footbridge, bicycle bridge that crosses under the power line to the substation further up the Rattlesnake was designed to be able to handle vehicles crossing that. So is that part of your alternate scenario?
It is now. There is a footbridge or bicycle bridge that is actually designed to take traffic and could be implemented as a part of our escape route as needed. I was not aware of it. So these are the things that we love to find out about.
I'm confused about something. Heading being evacuated north with a couple of thousand vehicles, where would we be sent to?
Well, that's a good question. I think we would fill up the school, we would fill up the soccer fields. We would be in a situation where you would just have to filter into the trailhead, the neighborhoods, park wherever you could to get out of the way. But that is the nature of living in a dead-end road. There's nowhere to go. So when you head north, you're going to head north. Maybe you've got some friends and family. You can stop by their house for.
Because of those of us who live the upper road.
Go ahead.
So it strikes me that all of the scenarios you've been talking about rely on people to use their own personal vehicles to leave. And I'm wondering if you're in any way thinking out of the car, because it strikes me that the vehicles themselves are a hazard when we're talking about traffic. We're talking about 6 hours to evacuate the whole thing just because everybody's in a car. Are you considering any sort of scenarios where there's buses or other sorts of things to move people? Not to mention the number of people who do not own cars or might be too infirm to drive or so forth. Are you considering that at all?
We do consider that. We work closely with the Access and Functional Needs Group, and so there are those who are going to need assistance in evacuation, and we're looking at some buses and things to accomplish that goal. But the reality of trying to run a bus up and pick people up and turn around and come back, unless we ban everybody from driving, the bus is just going to clog things up as much as you would like to. But we're not ruling anything out. I mean, these are all scenarios we can look at. Neighbors helping neighbors is the best thing we got going, right?
But I mean, it wouldn't be necessarily just one bus going back and forth. I mean, if there's a real emergency, you can take all of the mountain lines, you can send it up there to bring people out.
Yes,
Help
yes.
them, like you're not allowed to get in your car right now, get on the bus now. Right. Something like that. Are you thinking in terms of that scale of mass transit?
No, because I don't know if we could tell people not to drive. We can suggest it, we can make lots of suggestions, but we don't have the authority to tell people to do much of anything. Your own personal plan, yes. Yes, when Adrian talked about the what ifs, right? And I love that what if game. What if tomorrow a fire comes through here? Am I ready for that? What if it happens while I'm at work? What if I don't have a car? What if all I have is a bicycle? How am I going to get out of here if this occurs? And that is truly the personal responsibility that is on you to have a plan, to understand your own situation and know how are you going to get out.
One of the biggest factors in wildfire is the direction of the mosquitoes.
he was mentioning that the winds can be very erratic and very strong. And that is a common denominator when you look at Paradise, California, Lahaina, Maui. When you look at the fires that have gone really bad, they're all under high winds and dry, hot temperatures. And so that is something that makes the hair, the back of your neck stand up when that wind starts howling and it is hot and dry. Everybody should be considering where they're at, what they're doing, and what they would do if a fire happened at that time. Let me make sure I'm done with my PowerPoint. I'm not even sure I'm done with this yet.
Just on that scenario, I wanted to hear what the time period is to get everybody to work. I just didn't get that number.
Let me hand you over.
Yeah, thank you. Good question. So,
Repeat the question, please.
thank you. So she was asking, what is the time frame for all of the vehicles to depart from these addresses? And in this specific scenario, it's 45 minutes for everyone to move away from the chlorine spill towards one of those two initial locations. And that total evacuation time frame was 2 hours, I believe, but let me double check.
Get the, we're done here, motion. So I know that, we have certainly not answered all of your questions, but I do hope that what we can leave you with is that there is something that you guys can do. Signing up for alerts, being aware of your environment, having a plan on how to get out. You can help us, right? And you can help your neighbors. In Montana, we have a tradition of neighbors helping neighbors, knowing who lives next to you, knowing who may need a ride, understanding how to build a plan, and then coming to us and saying, hey, we think that this might work. We have some ideas about how we can do this better. We're open to that. We love those kinds of discussions. So I hope that you guys wouldn't hesitate to come to your neighborhood council, let them know what your ideas are, and then they can come to us. Or if you want to come on down to the courthouse, we're in the basement. Come and look us up. Oh, no, I think we have the authority. We just don't have the manpower to manage every intersection. If you count those intersections on the way down and then count 2 police cars for every intersection, it doesn't take long to have maxed out all of our folks. Yeah. It's absolutely, we could.
We have to hear the question.
Okay, she asked, I'm sorry, sir, I apologize. She asked, how come we can't block every intersection or stop traffic during an evacuation and have that very controlled and organized top to bottom evacuation? The top people leave first, the next wave leaves, and everybody leaves in this very specific and very mathematical order, which unfortunately we're all people in here and we're really bad at that. But it would be awesome if we could. And we could talk about perhaps how we could achieve that goal. We would have to have time. Time is really our enemy in these things. So given enough time, we can do anything. Time and resources, we can achieve, but it's that time is what really usually, that short end of the time wedge when we just don't have enough time to get the right people in the right places. Okay, we've got time for one more. And we're giving her the mic.
So, I've been involved in 2 evacuations out of the lower Rattlesnake. So what I'm talking about is what I figured out I needed to do as a good neighbor to help out with those evacuations. One was when we had 8 power lines come down just below Missoula Avenue for about 3 blocks. And I was there within about 2 minutes. I ran and got my flares out of my car and my 2 bright orange sawhorses blocked so no cars could go down. Then went down to the bottom of it and stood and redirected traffic to go up Greeno Drive. then when we had the avalanche, that's a half a block from my house, I was there. Tons of cars were coming up Jackson and thinking that they could turn on Holly and continue on up. Well, Holly was where the avalanche was. It was blocked. So I was out there directing traffic and I couldn't do it alone. So I grabbed my next door neighbor, Doug Chase, who is a policeman and our sheriff for years. I learned so much watching Doug, and it took both he and I to handle all the traffic coming up Jackson. And I was all ramped up because it's an avalanche. And Doug is just like going over to people's car and saying, "Hello, ma'am, we've got an avalanche. Can you go up and around down Monroe and then over to Greeno Drive and get to your house that way?" Calm, chill. It was like, oh yeah, why ramp everybody up? But I learned a lot, and I was out there for 3 hours redirecting traffic probably because an avalanche was such an unusual situation. 911 knew I was out there, but there was no EMS to help for 3 hours. Finally, after 2 hours, they brought a bench, a bar to put across Van Buren and Cherry. But what that taught me is it takes us. And all of us that have been at this meeting now know how to think about if the fire's at the Upper Rattlesnake, we need to help the people get out of there first, and we can all stand at our intersection with Rattlesnake Drive or Van Buren and help direct traffic. And I think, there's a lot of us here, we could do it.
I just want to say, once again, I really appreciate you guys, and we're going to stick around here. You have some more questions, you want some more answers, we're not going anywhere. Come and grab us. We'll answer them as best as we can. But thanks you all. Thanks to everybody.
Over here with representatives of the community emergency response teams. Folks, this is the best place to go right here to find out how to get trained and what you can do neighbor to neighbor. I spent 30-some years in Oregon where we had very robust programs, and we had 2 500-year floods, tornado. I can't even tell you how many disasters. We had one right after another there. And if you go sign up with these folks, you'll get free training, and you will be able to help the people who live close to you. You take care of your own family first, then you help the people in your neighborhood. You'll make lists, you'll know who the people are in your neighborhood, who have medical training, who the infirm people are, and all kinds of things. And by God, it works. And then it involves the amateur radio operators. It takes care of a hell of a lot of your communication problems. Okay, so the last thing I want to add is, so go talk to these folks, and I'm going to be talking to Jan, as I did before, about trying to have a prototype for the Rattlesnake area to set up neighborhood-oriented program for the people who just get general search training and won't necessarily be responding to the specialized unit over here. The last thing I want to leave people with is, if you ever read Hershey's book about Hiroshima, here's one thing that should stick in your mind. 1/4 to 1/3 of the civilians who died when we dropped the bomb on Hiroshima could have been saved if, in the panic, people hadn't run past everyone lying on the sidewalk and the ground in front of them, and instead had stopped and focused on who was right there in front of them. We can meet this challenge, and it can be done with grants, and with a turnout like this, boy, it's incredible what we can do. So go talk to these people over here at this table. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, sir. So, talk to sir. One last thing I'd like to say, something that our director says a lot, is the worst plan you make